everybody. You're listening to In the Company of Charity podcast, as always. We're here at the end of the season.
I can't believe it. That's right. End of season 5. That's crazy.
Y'all, we've been doing this for 5 years, if you can
5
believe it.
years. Yeah, and we haven't lost our fervor yet.
No, of course not.
We're still in it. We're in it to win it.
And we are so grateful that everyone listens, even though we're just these sister goofballs and we're having a blast.
We are having a blast.
We're just letting you have a little window into this fun time.
Yeah.
So
I have to say it's kind of funny here in the seminary when one of them might be listening while she's like cleaning the bathroom or something, or doing her duty, or just kind of, well, hey, I'm like, that's when they can concentrate, maybe. I don't know. But anyways, what's funny is they kind of freak out a little, like when I actually talk out loud, when they're hearing my voice in their head, because they have their earbuds on or something. And it's like, oh my God, you're right there.
Surround sound.
Surround sound. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So it is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, we have some wonderful listeners, and that's great.
Yeah, you guys rock. Thank you for supporting the podcast and for sticking with us. And you need to stick with us today. Today is a mix of co-host chat / interview.
I know.
It's the 2 of us.
It's going to be exciting. Since I get to be interviewed, that way you're on the hot seat to have to ask the questions.
I have to come up with some good questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So today you've heard, if you've been listening, you've heard a little bit about your experience at the Seminarium, which happened at this point, a few months ago, back in April?
Yeah, it was mid-April into the early May. Yeah. So it was 3 weeks, pretty much 3 weeks in April.
And we do have more interviews coming out. You'll hear them next season. But we thought we'd just kind of get a little window into this insider baseball of the Daughters of Charity formation. And so, okay, first, you have to give a little recap for anyone who's new about what exactly the Seminarium is.
Okay. So the Seminarium is a gathering of the seminary directresses and the postulant directresses. I guess that's, so it's all of the sisters who work with in formation with the postulants and then the seminary sisters. So we know, if you've been listening, that postulancy is like the year before incorporation or entrance into the company. And because vows are not, we don't do vows like religious do vows, so it's not like you have to go first vows and then solemn vows or whatever, final vows, right? When you are incorporated, you are a member of the company. You're in. So when you enter the seminary, that's your vocation date, and that's when you begin. And so the seminary directress works with the initial formation, the beginning of formation as a daughter of charity. So that's who's gathered at this meeting.
In Paris at the
Motherhouse. Which,
we could go on and just talk about the Motherhouse.
We could, because it's amazing. The Motherhouse of the Daughters of Charity at 140 Rue de Bac, Paris, France, is also better known probably to most people, is the Shrine of the Miraculous Medal. It is the place where Catherine Labouré had the vision of Mary, where she was given the call to promote the mercy of God through the miraculous medal. And so it's amazing to be there and be able to see all the pilgrims who come, all the people who come every day, all day. They're just streaming in to pray there. It's quiet. There's masses going on all day. It's just really, really beautiful. And to know that this is this very special place to the people of Paris, but also it's our home. It's the Motherhouse. It's the place from which we are all sent. Even though we are in different provinces, it's really the
That's the heart
company.
of the
Yeah,
company.
it's the company that sends us, and that's represented in the Mother House. So that's why being at the seminarium is so amazing, because it's not just a certain group of seminary directresses, it's seminary directresses and postulant directresses from around the world,
Mm.
right? Around the world. That's crazy to me. I mean, it was just so fascinating. The sessions that we had, so it was 21 days, and we had sessions like every day except for maybe one Sunday and half a Saturday. So it gives you an idea. Started at 7 in the morning, went till about 7 at night each day, had breaks in between, but we were going the whole time, in 5 different languages. So we had sisters,
So bonkers.
yeah, and it's so cool though. You're like in this big room, and there were
You have this
53
headset and they give you this
headset.
thing and it's like
Yeah,
press 1 for Spanish, press 5
yeah,
for
yeah,
English, and if you're bilingual, then
yeah,
you can just switch between. It's
yeah.
pretty
So we
fun.
had French, Spanish, English, Portuguese, and Polish were the 3 languages that we were working with. And we had sisters from every continent, Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe. I mean, it was just all over the world, all over the world. And I think now we have something like 161 seminary sisters, maybe
Mm.
even more now. Um, and I don't know as much about the postulants. I don't work with postulants, so it's a little bit different too, because that's the pre-stage, right? They're not
They're not
seminary. They're not
sisters yet.
sisters yet. They're
Mhm.
not sisters yet. So that just makes it a little bit different. So you're meeting with both groups, because the postulants will become seminary sisters. We pray, but then we also met just as seminary directresses, with our own cares and needs for our stage of formation.
Did you ever have the moment, and I'm sure you did at some point, where you were like, what is God calling me? Like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm just a girl from Boston. Like,
Yeah, I think that happened when Sister Katie called and said, Sister would like you to consider, being the seminary directress. That was about the time I thought, are you kidding? Did you dial the wrong number? Here, why would anyone have thought to ask me to do this? But there's a real grace to it for sure. I mean, to be with our newest members, in this time of the first fervor of their vocations, this is when they are, trying it all on. They've been called, they know that they're here for a reason. God has called them, in the privilege of watching them and being part of and accompanying them. And that was one of the biggest probably messages of this seminarium, was to recognize ourselves as accompaniment. We're not forming them, God forms them. We try to help God's message move along a little bit, and to be with them when that call of their vocation deepens in them, when they have those moments. I say to them, when I was younger in vocation, and even now, there are times when I'll be kind of sitting in a community, maybe watching TV or something, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed by this sense that there's like no place else you want to be. And
mm,
I say this to them all the time, this is one of those moments, why there's just no place else, no place else on the planet I want to be right now. And I would say to them, just mark those moments, because those are what's going to hold you together later. And I began to realize in the seminarium that those are universal things. It doesn't matter where you're from. If this call, this vocation to be a servant of the poor, right, to meet Christ in the poor, and to have Christ be present to you in people who are vulnerable, people who are suffering, to be able to live our constitutions, bringing the kingdom, reminding people of their salvation, bringing the gospel, and reminding the poor of how much they're loved by God. If that's your call, man, there's nothing like it. And to be with women who are just glowing in that,
mm.
are just really feeling it, is so beautiful. It's just as beautiful and poignant to watch them struggle sometimes.
Mm.
You know, our own humanity gets in our way. Um, our own life stories get in our way. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. Our doubts, our sense that we're not worthy, all those icky things
Mm.
that happen, again, are universal. There wasn't a directress who didn't have a conversation or have some comment about how do we help accompany them through their doubts. You know,
Mm.
how do we help accompany them when they're questioning, did God really call me? How do we accompany them when their families are still not sure and not being supportive? You know, how do we accompany them when they miss their friends? You know, and you're trying to help them to see that this is a sacrifice God's calling them to. You know, all of that is. I began to realize more and more at the seminarium how what an incredible blessing it is, to be in this stage of a sister's formation, and to remember back to my own.
Just give everybody a sense of like where some of these sisters are from, the
Sure.
seminary directresses and postulant directresses.
Yeah, so there were sisters from Poland, Slovakia, sisters from different African countries, Angola, um, the Congo, Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Eritrea, sisters from the Philippines and Southeast Asia province is made up of like 9 different countries. Sisters from Indonesia were there, sisters from Vietnam, Spain, Portugal. Um, yeah, just I'm sure I've missed somebody from somewhere. Madagascar, I mean, one sister from Syria was there, in the French language group, and that was the other, is there was such a mix in each language group, right? Um, and that was also really interesting.
Was there any talk about, I mean, I'm just thinking in the state of the world right now. I think Americans were kind of, I don't know, maybe a little too self-focused sometimes where we're like, everything's falling apart, we're so divided and it's terrible. And we forget that there are things happening in the world like war and starvation and infighting and civil wars and so was there any talk in that sense, and maybe you can't share too much.
Yeah, and it is hard to share because sisters are going through things that are very sensitive, and it's not like, some great world leader is listening to our podcast, but we need to be sensitive to the fact that uh, that religious sisters, Catholic sisters, uh, can be targets in community, in countries and in governments where the church is seen as rebellious and seditious or something, so yeah, I mean, there were sisters from Ethiopia there, and we know that there've been troubles in Ethiopia. I mean, certainly a sister from Syria has seen great sufferings from Syrian refugees and what's happened in their country. Many of the countries in Africa, like the Congo, there's great suffering and war and civil war and hunger and we did the podcast on Ethiopia about the lack of water, that
Mhm.
this is something that our sisters are living with, as well as trying to form young women who are feeling called to come to community, and coming out of those situations, um, in order to serve people who, in many ways, are even living in more vulnerable situations than they are. So, I mean, what you think about when you hear stories about around the world, earthquakes and typhoons and weather things that we kind of listen to and don't really understand all the impact, these are devastating to the works of the sisters, but as well as can be devastating to their living situation.
Yeah, I think, I'm just trying to imagine someone coming to community from dire poverty or a country that's war torn, that God still calls, and the courage it takes for people to say yes amid challenging circumstances. And that's just you know, one little piece. The other
Mhm.
pieces of like, what if my family's against it? Or, you know, I have to learn a new language in order to kind of be able to function. And it seems like there's a lot of potential barriers, even if you can say
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we just had the interview with the two sisters, Sister Sabina from
In
from India, and their conversation about Sister Lucy talking about the postulants, Sister Sabina talking about the seminary sisters, that every state in India has its own language. And so if you get sisters from 2 or 3 different states, they all have their own language. Though there's not a sense of a universal language other than English, but they may not have studied that, and they may not have any they have not used English in any kind of way other than maybe some formal way. And now they have to learn English to function in the community, because we don't have the constitutions, for example, or the writings of St. Vincent or St. Louise in the language of their state, right? And so their common language, the language that they use, is English. So you're not only trying to come and learn about this community and the works that they do, but you're also having to learn this other language just to function, just to be formed, in it. And so the same with sisters from parts of Africa who, speak their own language, have to learn French, many of them, or you just realize, wow, this isn't Duolingo time, right? This is big time stuff
Yeah, next level.
that sisters, our youngest members, our young sisters, these new sisters, are not only taking on the challenge of formation in the company as a daughter charity, but they're taking on also the commitment to learn a language not their own, in order to function there, to be able to learn what they need, be able to read the constitutions in a way they can understand them. It's remarkable. It really, even just to see the seminary directresses, I'm going to talk most about them, right? Because that's who I spent most of my time with. But to see those who are from Indonesia, they don't use English other than when they're in community, like this kind of environment, right? Or when they're, with the sisters, and have to work with some of the documents that are translated into English for them. I mean, I'm like, wow, you people are just so amazing. We've got nothing we can talk about, and complain about, when you see the
Yeah.
depth of a vocation that says, I'm going to learn a whole different language just to manage this. It's amazing. And you have someone who's trying to talk about her fears and her struggles, uh, and maybe there isn't a common language even in the province. In the province of
Mhm.
Southeast Asia, it's, there's sisters from the Philippines. It's in the Philippines, and so they have sisters from Myanmar and Japan and Korea, and I'm thinking,
Talk about different
yeah,
cultures.
how do you accompany a sister through that? And that's when you realize that we're human beings, and um, yeah, so those are big challenges. I think the other is, there's just typical challenges that young women are young women today, and the sense of their freedom to be themselves. We talk about developed countries and, developing countries, and we try to use language that helps us to realize the different levels of formation, levels of development within a country itself. But
When
there are
I
some things that are universal. Every one of us talked about telephones. Every one of us talked about
Yes,
cell phones. It
I was
was
going to
just
bring
like
that up.
every one of us struggled with, how much should they use it? Should we let them have it? I mean, that's a formation issue now. It wasn't a formation issue even 5 years ago. We weren't talking about whether or not they should be able to keep their cell phone.
Oh,
And how,
when
if
I
they do,
came, I had I had a flip phone number one the year that I came,
yeah,
and that was a big deal to
yeah,
give it up, and
yeah,
there was no, you can kind of have it or not kind of have it. It was, we're giving you a new phone, but after the seminary. And so it was a pretty tough break, but I cannot even imagine, because everything is so integrated now, way more than it was 15 years ago. So you wanted to share a quote from Mother Guillermin that was very relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I found this when I was a vocation director many, many moons ago, back in the early 2000s. And yeah, Sister Suzanne Guillermin, who is the Superioress General of the company at a time of great change. And she's, so she said, a transformation as tangible as this, like this whole world is changing in 1965, affects the mentality of the youth who come to us. So think again, I just kept thinking, God, her words are so powerful for today. She says, these women who will form the community of tomorrow. And that is really what the seminarium was about. It's about planting the seeds of formation. That's what, the seminary is supposed to be, that sense of the seed planting, of the formation of what will grow. And and so she writes, we must understand and appreciate these young women and help them. Help them. That's the accompaniment, right? Help them to put very great possibilities of their generation at God's service. To put the possibilities of their generation to God's service, and not, this is so important, and not insist that they be like ourselves. She says,
Snaps to that.
In the same way, we must revise and modify our own mentality, our habit of life, sometimes even the structures of our institutions and our manner of acting. To enter actively into the procedure of the church and adapt ourselves to the world today, these are questions of life or death for the company. And what is still more serious, of fidelity to our vocation or its betrayal. You want to just like drop the mic, drop the book, you just got to drop everything, because that's just, I mean, you read this and I said, this woman wrote this sister wrote this in 1965. And I think that's what we talked about at the seminarium, that we have to recognize where young women are coming from today. Their lives are very different. And maybe not even so different in some ways, but their awareness of themselves and where they're from. A lot of the conversations we had were very difficult. The sessions we had about accompanying women who have been abused, right? The abuse scandal of the church, creating safe space where women can feel courageous enough to share as much as they can their story, so that it can become a part of their formation and their healing, right? All of that incredibly sensitive and sometimes very difficult conversations that we had about what we now know about the condition of women in the world, right?
I mean, it's in the US, it's 1 in 4.
It's 1 in 4. In other countries, it's even more. And many, at least 2 of the speakers said, it's not if, it's when. It's not if this happened, it's when did it happen, and how has it impacted her, her life, her ability, her, her way of listening to God speaking to her. How can we help heal the brokenness that comes before us, and help that young sister to find her way in community, because their life stories don't eliminate them. Right? That sense that there's a brokenness we can't, deal with, right? That stories we can't hear, and they just automatically eliminate people. We're beyond that sense that that somebody's life story is an immediate, rejection, right? If someone's family was broken, divorce or something in the old days, that would have been
A deal
enough,
breaker.
a deal breaker. So, when you confronting and you're with women and they're telling you stories that are so painful, and you realize, what we're more and more aware of what's happening in the world. I go back to this, and I think this is Mother Guillermin saying to us, they are not us. They and the young women of 1965 and the young women of 2023 are not who I was 27 years ago when I came to the community. It's just we're in a different world. Um, and so to be able to help them tell their story in a way that's respectful, in a way that's safe, so that they can begin to find the healing that is necessary. And I just had this really profound kind of sense that for our sisters, we talk in our constitutions about, where no poverty is foreign to a daughter of
Mm,
charity, right? And that we're called to serve everyone everywhere. That expansive sense of the Daughters of Charity call is to not one kind of poverty, not one kind of person, but to everyone everywhere whose poverties are not foreign to us. It's not foreign to us because we've been in touch with our own difficulties, our own
mm.
poverty. We are part of the human story, right? We're part of humanity. And so when we are in touch with our own suffering, our own poverty, our own brokenness, we can then see and be courageous enough to journey with someone who's experienced that as well. We can see it. It's not foreign to us because we've found the courage to face it in ourselves.
I remember when we went to Saint Nicolas de Champs, which is the church in Paris where um, Louise de Marillac had her Lumiere experience,
Yes,
and
yeah.
you know, it felt like to me that time slowed, that everything was quiet, that very sort of intense time of prayer and of connection and of all of us just being there in this moment. um was there anything for you that stood out that said like, oh my gosh, like we're part of this huge heartbeat of St. Vincent, St. Louise, and the other Vincentian saints and blesseds, and there's a weight to it in a sense, but not a crushing weight, or maybe
Yeah,
crushing as in purifying, right? I mean, there
yeah,
can be a
yeah,
good crushing, but
yeah. I'm glad you asked that because there's two. I think there would be two things. We also went to Saint Nicholas de Champs um, for Mass. Uh, Of course, we're there, just a few weeks before we have the procession of the Lumiere, the actual. We've talked about this in the podcast, right? The actual
mhm,
document that Louise wrote in the 1600s, almost 400 years ago. She had the experience 400 years ago, this May. I mean, June, you just like, whew, it's enormous. Just that's enormous. So we're at the church and we have Mass at the church, for Louise. And it was just, again, very, very powerful experience to be in the church where literally our company was born, right? Where the company of the Daughters of Charity, the moment the Spirit blew that idea into Louise's heart, it happened right there. Crazy, crazy stuff, right?
mm,
Like, wow, this is in 400 years later, we're still living this amazing, wonderful charism. This relationship between Vincent and Louise will begin for not another like 10 years. I mean,
mhm,
Louise sat with that vision of the comings and goings, a community where women would be outside the cloister. Oh, it's just there's a million things to say about it, right? So we took a picture while we were there of the whole group, the English speaking group, right? And so I sent it to Sister Joanne Basha, who was with the seminary, because of course I'm away and she's with the seminary sisters, and she was doing a couple of sessions with them, instructions while I was away. So I sent it to her, and I said, show this to them and tell them that I'm here praying for them. I'm in the church where Louise had this experience. And so she, even to make it more dramatic, started that session by reading the Lumiere, which is fairly long. I mean, it's not long, it's not pages, but so she read the Lumiere to them, where Louise talks about her doubts and how on this, from Ascension to Pentecost, and then she's in the church and all of her doubts are lifted, and she realizes that God is really with her, and that she's loved by God, and that God will let her live her vow of, she wants to be vowed in the evangelical councils, and but that it's going to be different, and she can't understand why. So all of this. So she reads this to them and she says, and your directress is there right now.
Stop
And,
it.
and she
I'm
shows
gonna.
them the picture. It was, I mean, I wasn't there, but
Ooh.
I mean, I had my idea of like, she's going to show it and they're all going to be like, oh, that's great. She built it up even more. That's when I realized, like, this is the perennial story of our community, right? That I could be there sending this picture to Sister Joanne, who then shares it with them, and everybody gets it. Everybody, the youngest, to Sister Joanne, certainly not the oldest, but she gets it. I'm doing, there was just this sense that the distance was no longer a separation. The distance just disappeared. And in many ways, because we were in that, I was in that space and invited them in that way, we became one. That's, I
Mm.
think, those are the moments that you realize the universality of the company, right? That there are no borders. Sister Francoise talked about that. We are a company without borders.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. And so I think that's probably where I would want to end, that sense that we live in our provinces, because of organizational needs, right? And we address the issues and the poverties that are before us. And what we address in the United States is different than what might get addressed in Kenya or Congo or the Philippines or Spain or Portugal or any of those other countries. We
Mm.
see what's in front of us, read the signs of the times, see the poor who present themselves, and how we find the poverty, in our world around us. And we do that around the world with the same mission, every daughter of charity living the charism handed down to us from St. Vincent and St. Louise over these 400 years. I don't even know how your mind can grasp all of that. And yet, as you were saying, there's a crushing feeling, but it's a deepening. It's a feeling that takes your breath away. It's so amazing.
Mm. Wow. Well, and we're not going away, guys. I mean, we're going away for a little mini break
Yeah.
until,
Yeah.
end of September to celebrate St. Vincent's feast day. We'll kick off the new season, but everybody needs a rest, a Sabbath. We're going to take a little Sabbath and do our thing. But we do appreciate each and every one of you as you listen. We pray for you. We love you. We want to be in contact. So you can email us anytime. We'll get your emails and respond as best we can. companyofcharity@gmail.com. And thanks for a great season.
Yeah, it was a great season. Really was. Go back while we're on hiatus. Go back and re-listen to some of your favorites, and listen to some that you haven't heard yet, because they're worth it for sure. We think so, because
Absolutely.
we
did
love them all.
Yeah,
we did them.
We
Yeah.
did 'em.
Yeah.
We'll have more to come too. So God bless you guys.